Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. For 25 years, sports author and commentator Bill Littlefield has held a unique position in public radio. As host of Saturday morning's Only a Game, he's hosted the network's only national sports program. But that role's coming to an end in late July when Bill retires. His credentials go far beyond sports. He is an author and educator with degrees from Yale and from Harvard University's Graduate School of Education. Bill Littlefield joins us now via the long line from WBUR in Boston, where Only a Game originates. Bill, great to have you with us.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Don.
I'm so sorry to hear that you're leaving the program. I enjoy it. It gets my Saturdays off to a great start.
Well, we've been trying to do that for lots of people for a long time, and I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm sure the program will be fine going forward with whomever they choose to put in the host seat.
Nobody's selected yet, I guess.
No, there's a fierce competition underway even as we speak.
All right. So are you going to put your feet up on the back porch, or do you have other projects?
I have a number of other projects. One of the things that happens, or at least it has happened to me over the long period of time that I've been doing commentaries and stories and hosting Only a Game, is I meet people who are doing all kinds of fascinating and interesting and worthwhile things. And I find myself thinking, oh, gee, wouldn't it be great if I could get involved in that project or the other project? And there's some of them working with incarcerated kids, for example. There's a program that collects used books and teaches kids at risk how to run a business by selling the books and keeping track of, the bookkeeping and all the rest. And some of these folks have indicated that they would be happy to have me tag along and see what I could do in their operations. So I'll be doing some of that and some teaching, and I hope I'll be doing some writing as well.
Interesting. You're pointing toward incarcerated kids. They're getting a lot of attention these days, aren't they? And with justification, I personally believe they've been kind of lost in the process. But now people are paying attention.
Well, we are unhappily a society that tends to try to solve problems by putting people in jail, regardless of age. And anything I can do to help bring attention to that and help some of these kids out, I will certainly happily do.
Of course, a lot of attention being given that issue in a different way today with what's going on down on the border with Mexico.
Yeah, boy, what a great opportunity to talk about this. It's disgusting. It's humanitarian values have been totally tossed out, and members of the current administration justifying it in the most duplicitous, hypocritical, and utterly unbelievable ways that I've ever heard. And I've been around for a long time.
Yeah, well, there are indications this morning that an executive order may soon be signed to stabilize this situation and put parents and kids back together. But stay tuned, as we often have to say.
Exactly. I mean, you never know what's going to happen day to day with this particular collection of thieves and grifters, and so we'll see what happens.
Well, you're not holding back on your language as you.
This is what happens when you get ready to. This is what happens when you get ready to retire. You know, what are they going to do to me now?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the intertwining of sports and politics. It's nothing new, but there's a lot of it going on these days, in particular with football and the Philadelphia Eagles and some of the things that have been going on. What's your take on all of that?
It's fascinating to me the way this has developed. I assume when you say now, you're referring to the events that sort of began with Colin Kaepernick deciding to take a knee. What's fascinating to me is the willful distortion of what some of these players have done. Kaepernick and others have been absolutely clear and very articulate in explaining that they're not disrespecting the flag, they're not disrespecting the anthem, they're certainly not disrespecting the military. Many of them have relatives in the military. What they're trying to do is make a statement about the fact that young black men in particular and black citizens in general have been mugged and beaten and in some cases shot and killed by the police. This is a situation which anybody with any sort of perception and compassion should be objecting to and protesting against. And these legitimate protests, these legitimate exercises of free speech have been distorted and misrepresented by people who are just trying to gain political advantage by calling NFL players who take a knee SOBs.
Is this a proper role for athletes, though, do you think, to protest? Again, I say it's nothing new. We can go back to the 68 Olympics and to Muhammad Ali and even beyond that. But is this the role that athletes should be playing?
I think it's a role that anybody should be playing. I think every citizen in the United States ought to be thinking about how do I make my country even better than it is? How do I make this nation that I love and in which I live even better and more admirable and more compassionate and more given to justice than it currently is? Athletes have as much right to do that as anybody else.
Do you think they've been effective at it recently?
Yes, I do, because I think they have very successfully brought these issues to the attention of people who might rather say, well, why don't you just entertain me and forget about the political stuff? It's gone well beyond that. And we've also had not only athletes but coaches and even some owners and general managers saying, we support our players. They have a right to make their to exercise their social conscience and their free speech, and we support them in doing it. And this is all to the good.
What do you see, Bill Littlefield, as the role of sports in 21st century America? Is it as it was 25 years ago, 50 years ago?
Well, now 50 years ago, that's very interesting. No, it's not. One thing that we can say about the role of professional sports in this country now that was certainly not true 50 years ago is it makes people rich. It didn't used to make the players rich because the players used to labor at the whims of their the fellows who owned the teams. Certainly entertainment is a big part of what sports is supposed to do. Certainly, in at least a temporary sense, a winning team can bring a region together. And you're in St. Louis. You know the Cardinals have done that on any number of occasions very effectively. But to me, also, part of the reason we put only a game together to begin with 25 years ago was sports lift our spirits. We look at people doing extraordinary things on the field or on the ice or whatever, and we say, my gosh, that expands my understanding of what dreaming can accomplish and what human beings willing to work hard and take advantage of their talents can accomplish. Watch the gymnasts at the Olympics sometime. Watch the people who were dedicated to breaking records go out and do it. And watch, on a daily basis, some guy chase a fly ball and haul it down just before it would have gone over the fence for a home run. And you say, holy cow, this really teaches me something about human potential that I hadn't thought about today.
Are today's athletes better than they were back in the day?
Well, I think you can answer that question in two ways. First of all, the male athletes are certainly better than they were because their nutrition is better and they're making so much money that they take care of themselves in ways that that athletes 25 and 50 years ago probably didn't do because there wasn't the incentive, the multi-million-dollar contract if you manage to take care of yourself and have a long career. But the other thing that's much more important is 50% of the population had virtually no athletic opportunities when I was a kid. There were no college scholarships for females playing basketball or ice hockey or soccer. There were no professional teams for women who wanted to play soccer or basketball or ice hockey or any of those sports. There was no lacrosse for women. We live in a wonderful era where women are finally beginning to get the opportunities that men have always taken for granted for themselves. We haven't come as far as we need to. We haven't got a population that supports and pays enough attention to women's sports to the extent that they should. But we're moving in the right direction, and to me, that's the most exciting and extraordinary development in sports in my lifetime.
These are the kinds of things that you talk about on your program and have for a good many years. When you started out with Only a Game, what did you perceive as your mission in this project?
Well, there were a number of missions. Happily, nobody made me do the academic thing and say, write down your goals, write down your missions, write down your evaluation tool. We were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. But, of course, we wanted to be entertaining because we realized if we weren't entertaining, nobody would listen. Of course, we wanted to be informative, and we wanted to have some fun. So we used to do sketches and shtick as well as everything else, and we wanted to be able to do what journalism does, that is, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted insofar as that was possible, too. And those goals have informed a lot of the stories that we've decided to do, and particularly the things that we've stuck with over the years.
How did you come up with Charlie Pierce? I'll tell you, I enjoy listening to him, and I guess I first came across him on your program, and then all of a sudden I'm watching the cable networks, and he's there as a political pundit and a darn good one.
Yeah, Charlie started as a sports writer here in Boston, and I knew him from those days a little bit. And when David Green, who was Only a Game's first senior producer, and I sat down and said, what would be a good thing for us to have as a regular feature, and we both agreed that having Charlie Pierce on the show on a regular basis would be terrific. And happily, he agreed. And we've had a heck of a good time meeting virtually every week and talking about whatever it is he wants to talk about. But you're right. His energy and his expertise extend way beyond sports, and his Esquire blog is spectacular. And like you, I look forward to his appearances on the political shows as well.
Yeah, he is great. It's World Cup time, obviously, and the whole world is watching and waiting. Not so much maybe in this country. I wonder why it is that America has never taken to soccer the way the rest of the world has.
Well, it kind of depends on how you measure it. The United States has taken to soccer if you measure it by participation. There's a tremendous number of kids and adults playing in recreational leagues. And, of course, the Pro League, MLS, has had growing success with a few bumps in the road. But as far as the World Cup is concerned, I'm going to push back a little bit on that because the U.S. team, men's team, has never gone very far in the World Cup. So if you're a U.S. citizen and you're a soccer fan, you always have to have some fallbacks for when the U.S. bounces out of the tournament, right? You always have to say, okay, now I'm going to root for Spain because they play so beautifully, or now I'm going to root for Mexico because they're our neighbor to the south, or now I'm going to root for Iceland because, holy cow, Iceland got in the tournament. How did that happen? So even if the U.S. had been there, fans in this country, I think, are used to saying, well, we got to have a couple of different ways we can go as the tournament goes on, and that's part of the fun. That you adjust your expectations and maybe even your allegiances as the tournament goes on.
It seems to me that women have fired up fan interest in that sport a lot more than the men have.
Well, the women's team that won the first World Cup in China was a terrific team in '91, and they got better and better and better as that decade went on. And I had the extraordinary good fortune to meet some of the women on that national team. And then, of course, when women's pro soccer got started, the first two manifestations of women's pro soccer in this country had teams in Boston. And I got to hang around, and we had my wife and daughters and I had season tickets to see the Boston Breakers play, and got to meet a bunch of the players. And it was quite extraordinary. They did teach people to appreciate teamwork, because on the national team especially, those women had played together for such a long time. They had grown up together. And when they got on the field, they really seemed to know, each one of them seemed to know where everybody else was going to be. So their passing was extraordinary. And watching them play was a real education in the game.
It sure makes a difference when you win, as you indicated earlier. It
does indeed.
Yeah.
Or at least when you give your fans the opportunity to think you might win. I mean, you don't have to win them all, but you like to be competitive.
Just looking at other sports now, Bill, what do you think the future of professional football is? This concussion thing is a big deal, and the Kaepernick thing has been a big deal. And it has been kind of America's pastime even beyond baseball for a good many years. What's its future, do you think?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. It has been America's pastime for a good many years, and it's long ago left baseball in the dust in terms of numbers and the fan interest that the NFL has generated. And then you throw in college football, which in some areas of the country is even more popular than the NFL. People are absolutely nuts about their college teams. I think it's the NFL is a gigantic corporation that's making a lot of money and making a lot of owners very, very wealthy. And probably it's not going to, crash and burn anytime soon. On the other hand, if they continue to be as hypocritical and as deceptive regarding CTE and some of the other conditions that retired pro football players are experiencing, they may be digging their own grave in the long run. And there's certainly lots of parents out there who are saying to their young boy children, let's think about a sport other than football that you might enjoy playing.
There really is some traction there from what we see and what we hear, certainly in this part of the country, that parents are pulling kids away from that sport.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is true. And when the former president of the United States says if he had sons, he wouldn't want them playing football, I think that has some impact.
How about baseball? You have indicated that is no longer technically America's pastime. A lot of people love it, especially here in St. Louis. But
of course,
the game is slow, and that's an issue today. What's its future, I wonder?
Well, the old cliche in baseball was always baseball is a boring game only if you're a boring person. If you have an imagination and you enjoy watching a number of different things transpiring all at the same time, none of them especially obvious, then baseball is a great game, and I love it. And I have the good fortune to live in a city where there's a wonderful old ballpark called Fenway Park. Uh-huh. And traditionally, at least over the last little while, a very competitive team, currently battling the Yankees for first place in the American League East. So I love baseball, and I played fast-pitch softball for many years and never found it slow, never found it boring, and don't find it boring to watch either. So I have no problem with it, and I'm happily simultaneously a big soccer fan and a big baseball fan.
Was that your sport, baseball, or fast-pitch softball?
Well, to say that anything was my sport is a little misleading because, as I have said numbers of times, I was the intramural athlete par excellence. I could play anything, but I never played anything well enough for anybody to mistake me for a prospect. So I had a great time playing sports growing up and fast-pitch softball when I was older. But it was playing at rather than playing in my case.
Staying with baseball for a moment, efforts are underway to speed up the game. Are you a fan of what they're trying to do?
It depends on what they're trying to do. I mean, I've heard some proposals which are so silly and also so ultimately destructive of the game that I would not want to see them, such as hit 3 foul balls and you're out, or 2 strikes and 3 balls rather than 3 strikes and 4 balls. On the other hand, if they can actually figure out a way to prevent the batter from stepping out of the box and readjusting his batting gloves after every pitch, I'm all in favor of that.
Well, the limiting the the number of visits to the mound and things like that, that may speed up the game. But on the other hand, they have the instant replay, which takes 3 or 4 minutes every time they go to it.
Exactly the problem. And it's not just baseball that's being slowed down by whatever the manifestation of instant replay is in the particular game. Basketball now has the same issue. Yeah. You know, they stop the game and everybody goes over and watches the film. And come on, man. We got along for a lot of years without that, and basketball had a nice pace to it. And so, okay, now it's time for me to be characterized as one of those guys who says, get off my lawn.
Only about 30 seconds left. Let me ask you this one to end it. Should NPR be doing more sports programming?
I think the listeners should be in charge of that decision. If listeners were all to call their or write or email or, you know, whatever, their public radio stations and say, hey, there ought to be more sports, then probably NPR and the particular stations would be very, very receptive to the listeners. That's always been a strength of the network as far as I can tell.
Well, we've had a good one on the air for 25 years, only a game. And thank you so much for that, Bill Littlefield, and also for being with us. It's been great talking to you.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Don.
Bill Littlefield, soon to depart after 25 years as host of Only a Game, heard here on Saturday mornings. You know, we need your help for our Behind the Headlines segment this Friday. We'll be discussing the local implications of a story that continues to rock the nation. What do you make of Donald Trump's policy that is separating migrant parents from their children? How should we respond here in St. Louis, and where do we go from here? The story is changing even as we speak. You can share your thoughts by leaving us a voicemail at 314-516-NEWS. Again, that's 314-516-6397. We'd love to hear from you. Archive versions of past St. Louis On the Air programs available for download or podcast at stlpublicradio.org. St. Louis On the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU. Thank you for listening. I'm Don Marsh.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.